Robservations with Robert, Meyer, Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members this, the Post-Geek singularity community. This is Robservations, the show about something number 710. Now, first things first, a huge event happened this past weekend, but I really wasn't on Robservations Saturday, and yesterday was Father's Day. But I would be remiss if I did not mention this momentous day. As all of you know, one of the great things about doing this channel is supporting in any way we can the next generation of imagination connoisseurs par excellence. And we've known him for over a year now. Dayton Wallace. This man had a 10th birthday over the weekend. Now you might ask, besides being Jack Wallace's son, who is he and why is he worthy of celebrating? What is Aiden doing that makes him an imagination connoisseur? Well, he is putting his money where his mouth is, or where, I guess, his creativity, where his action figures are. We've seen him before on this channel. He's creating art with his action figures. Look at that mise-en-scène. Come on now. Here he is at work, hard at work, creating excellent images of his action figures out in the wild. How many 10-year-old kids are doing this? Maybe more should. Look at this shot of the Predator out there, ready to attack Arnold. I mean, one of these, I love these. Deathstroke, the Terminator himself, backlit by the sun, out there ready to take out a dandelion. And I've got to tell you, I've seen a lot of his work. Aiden's actually sent me some of his work. I have framed examples of his work here in the Robservatory. I just love the idea that he's out there. He's actually, I should have pulled the photograph, but he's shooting a Flash Gordon, classic Flash Gordon action figure. So he's not only delving into our modern, very well-known franchises, but he's going back into the past, where it all began, the inspiration for Star Wars with Flash Gordon. I should have found that photo. But we wish him, Aiden Wallace, a very happy 10th birthday, sir. We expect great things from you. No pressure. No pressure, but we very much appreciate you as an imagination connoisseur who's only 10. But that doesn't mean you don't have to learn how to spell the word connoisseur, because you do. You are one of us, sir. And we welcome all of your work. Please send it in. Hopefully we'll get to see as you progress. I mean, you might become the Richard Amsel of action figure photography. Could be amazing. I mean, I know it's going to be amazing. You have a great future ahead of you, and we are proud to call you an imagination connoisseur. Happy 10th birthday, and have a good summer. And I still owe you a box, which has now gotten twice as big. Anyway, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, kind souls, imagination connoisseurs from across the 28 known galaxies, welcome to the first Monday of summer. Can you believe it? And I'll tell you, it was pretty funny to wake up and read this story because it was on Deadline, brought to us by Mike Fleming, who's, if he's writing about it, you can take it to the bank. Mike Fleming is one of the most trusted reporters in entertainment journalism, and on Deadline today, there was this story. Steven Spielberg, hell freezes over, not on the first day of summer, it don't, but hell freezes over Steven Spielberg's Amblin partners in deal to make movies for Netflix. Now, this is quite shocking, really, because, you know, they have a long time association with Universal, which is part of that. So, I was very, it's, I don't know what to make of this. I didn't know what to make of this. But anyway, let me read this article. What a difference 2 years in a global pandemic make. Steven Spielberg, who a couple of years ago was quoted His camp maintains he never said it, or anything he might have said was severely taken out of context, drawing a clear line between theatrically released films and streamer films, no, I believe he said it, has birthed his Amblin partners into a partnership with Netflix that will cover multiple new feature films per year. It shows once again the Netflix-led progress toward dissolving the lines between streamed and theatrical films, and symbolically, it is a big deal for Netflix, Ted Sarandos, and Scott Stuber. I mean, it doesn't get any bigger than Steven Spielberg, people. The Netflix deal will coexist, I don't know how this is going to work, side by side with the one Spielberg and Amblin have at Universal Pictures. Neither will have a first shot at Amblin properties. Spielberg will make some films for Universal and others to be made for Netflix. The expectation is that Amblin will generate multiple films per year for Netflix, which has a voracious appetite for content and releases a new film per week. Amblin's Universal deal was extended last December, at which time comments reflected the possibility that a streaming deal might be in the offing. It's all very interesting because, of course, Universal has Peacock. So Spielberg will be working for two different streaming services. He will have a deal essentially with two different streaming services at the same time. The two companies have been collaborating for some time in an informal capacity. Netflix released the Amblin-produced, Aaron Sorkin-directed The Trial of the Chicago 7, a film that garnered 6 Oscar nominations. Netflix stepped up to acquire, to finance, and distribute Maestro, the film that Bradley Cooper is directing and starring in on the iconic composer Leonard Bernstein. That film is in pre-production. Said Amblin Partners chairman Spielberg on Monday in a statement, "At Amblin, storytelling will forever be at the center of everything we do. And from the minute Ted and I started discussing a partnership, it was abundantly clear that we had an amazing opportunity to tell new stories together and reach audiences in new ways. This avenue for our films, alongside the stories we continue to tell with our longtime family at Universal and our other partners, will be incredibly fulfilling for me personally, since we get to embark on it together with Ted Sarandos, and I can't wait to get started with him, Scott Stuber, and the entire Netflix team." Netflix co-CEO and chief content officer Sarandos called Spielberg a creative visionary and leader, and like so many others around the world, "My growing up was shaped by his memorable characters and stories that have been enduring, inspiring, and awakening. We cannot wait to get to work with the Amblin team, and we are honored and thrilled to be a part of this chapter of Steven's cinematic history," said Jeff Small, Amblin Partners CEO. "By deepening our ties with Netflix via this new film partnership, we are building on what has for many years been an incredibly successful working relationship in both television and film. The global platform they've built, with more than 200 million members, speaks for itself, and we're extremely grateful to have the opportunity to work closely with Scott and his amazing team to deliver Amblin's iconic brand of storytelling to the Netflix audience." Stuber, Netflix head of global film, said that Amblin and Steven Spielberg are synonymous with incredible entertainment. Their passion and artistry combine to make films that both captivate and challenge audiences. We look forward to working with Steven, Jeff, and the entire Amblin family on a new slate of films that will delight generations for years to come. CAA advised Amblin Partners on the deal. Amblin's Universal output includes the Best Picture Oscar winner Green Book and the Sam Mendes-directed 1917, which won 3 Oscars. Upcoming is the Colin Trevorrow-directed Jurassic World Dominion, which shot during the pandemic and will bow on June 10th, 2022. Amblin is also producer on Stillwater, the Focus Features film that Tom McCarthy directed and Matt Damon stars in. That film premieres at Cannes next month. Spielberg will direct and has also written with off-time collaborator Tony Kushner an Amblin-produced film based loosely on the master filmmaker's childhood growing up in Arizona, with Michelle Williams, Paul Dano, Gabrielle LaBelle, Seth Rogen, and Julia Butters. One would assume there might be some jockeying between Universal and Netflix over a film like that, but that one will go through a theatrical release at Universal. One area the director will not revisit is Jaws. Thank God. Deadline heard recently that Universal broached the subject to reboot Spielberg's breakout classic, with Spielberg producing, and the answer was a firm no. God bless them. Some at Universal and Amblin said this was already known and not a recent conversation. Whatever. While Jaws sequels fell far short of Spielberg's original, some films should just be left alone and appreciated in their original form. Spielberg directed a number of them, including E.T. and Schindler's List. Now, I was quite taken aback by this news, wondering, I mean, obviously, Spielberg does have a long-time deal with Universal in place. I mean, they go back Sugarland Express, Jaws. I mean, Spielberg started directing TV movies after he was sneaking onto the lot in the early 70s. So Spielberg's association with Universal goes back literally 50 years. So it was interesting to me to hear that Netflix, that they're going to partner together. I mean, I thought this was shocking. So I didn't quite know what to make of this news. So, as many of you know, I have a recent, very highly placed source in the entertainment business who I trust implicitly with their sage-like wisdom and advice. So I reached out to them and I said, yo, do you have any time to hit me back with an answer? And this person was traveling because, yes, they're producing something in a foreign land, but that's all I can say. And they were gracious enough to get back to me in the last couple hours when I sent them an email. So they came back to me and said, this was their insight, the Netflix Amblin deal wasn't a huge surprise because Spielberg saw an opportunity to create more movies where there is no downside in terms of financial loss. Sure, it could be harmful to the Amblin brand if the deal with Netflix results in a slew of subpar movies, but I suspect Spielberg and his executive team at Amblin will have some semblance of quality control over that at the very least, and it matches the quality of movies that Netflix produces in-house. For Netflix, it aligns the platform with one of the biggest names in Hollywood as a producer, but I'm sure their ultimate goal is for Spielberg to direct a movie for them. Once again, I want to thank my highly placed entertainment industry source for their insight. I have to agree, obviously. And look, not obviously. If I disagreed with their opinion, I would say, hey, I don't buy it. That sounds exactly along kind of the way I was thinking. The thing about working for a streaming service is you are alleviated of the pressure of the box office. You don't have to make a film that performs. Obviously, when a streamer when a streamer pays for your movie, they're paying for it, and it's based on views. You don't have to worry, and the money, you're not sharing it with anyone. You're not sharing it with exhibitors like theater owners. So I think anything that Spielberg and Amblin produces from producer Steven Spielberg comes the latest Netflix film, and I would imagine that what they're going to make is going to be pretty damn good. So I think this is good for Netflix, and obviously I think it's good for Amblin, and I think hopefully it'll be good for filmmakers that Amblin is going to need to make these movies, and with their oversight, Netflix is going to get an Amblin stamp of approval. I mean, I don't know if Amblin is going to say the Batteries Not Included sequel we've been waiting for over 3 decades, but hey, you never know. You never know. Because, I think the Batteries Not Included sequel or reboot could be something that would, especially with the UAPs running rampant all over our oceans. Why not? But, I won't be holding my breath. Maybe do a reboot of Heartbeeps. You just never know. I mean, I would imagine they're already doing an animated series. Also, it didn't mention it, but there is the Jurassic World animated series. It's already on Netflix. I don't know how much Amblin has to do with that. Probably quite a bit, actually. But, that's out there, too. So it's kind of like, I just think it's a win-win for everyone. It sounds pretty good to me. I hope we get it. Netflix. What I see coming from Netflix is that they're looking to make great movies. While we have, of course, you might have seen the Midnight's Edge video that Andre dropped about what's going on over at Amazon with their inclusion efforts, which I sort of have mixed feelings about. I don't know if I'm going to do a video about them. But, first and foremost, you got to never put your agenda before your characters and stories. And Amazon is doing that very thing. They are breaking the Burnett axiom. You cannot put your agenda before your characters and stories. That is not the way to make great entertainment. I'm sorry, Amazon, but it's disheartening to look at your... I understand what you're trying to do. I think it's great, ultimately, in theory. But at the end of the day, if you want to make movies, you should be worried about your characters and stories. I mean, I read your inclusion waiver over there, and I'm like, would Spike Lee get to make a movie? I don't know. Would The Five Bloods, of course, that's being made over at Netflix, which is cool. But I don't know, Amazon. I think it works both ways. Remember, never put your agenda before your characters and your stories. And I would say this. Amblin has a pretty great track record of telling stories for a long time, and certainly Mr. Spielberg is one of our greatest storytellers. And I'm looking forward to seeing what this new partnership, what the result of it is, to be honest. I think that could be pretty damn cool. So I'm excited. Look, with these kinds of things happening, I'm hoping that what I always hope, that we're going to get great movies from all kinds of voices, new filmmakers, people with opinions on the world we have yet to hear, and I'm looking very much forward to that. Now, speaking of Aidan Wallace, we also have, of course, Braxton Bowes and his father, Calvin. Calvin has written in. They apparently, as we all know, they're going to be in Las Vegas at the 55-year Mission Creation Star Trek Convention next month. Actually, not next month, in August. Calvin has written in an open letter to the showrunners of Star Trek. Dear Sirs, as a longtime Star Trek fan, I would like to present proof that you do not know what you are talking about when you say Star Trek has never appealed to children. I present as evidence my son Braxton Bowes, who is 6 and would definitely make a better showrunner than you guys, because he has the most important qualification. He loves Star Trek. You have said it was important to appeal to children for the franchise to continue. So my question is, why were you not concerned with this when you produced Discovery and Picard? I will point out Braxton was so excited when he heard Picard was going to be on, only to be disappointed and tune out after 3 episodes, and he does not like Discovery at all, and is only slightly amused by Lower Decks. Now you have 2 new shows coming out, Strange New Worlds and Prodigy. You say Prodigy is being made for him. If that's so, then why is he more excited about Strange New Worlds? You obviously do not know about children. You think it has to be a kiddie show to appeal to children, and it doesn't. Braxton never asked for a kid's show. All he wants is a good show. Good Star Trek. When he wants to watch some Trek, he does not turn on Star Trek Discovery or Star Trek Picard or Lower Decks. He always watches shows from Enterprise on back. He is hungry for new Trek, and you people constantly disappoint him. Yours, Calvin Bowes. Now this part is for you, Rob. Next time you read a letter from people at Paramount saying Trek never appealed to kids, ask them that if this is so, what has Braxton been watching all of his life? And why is he excited to meet William Shatner and not someone from your new Trek shows? Ooh. Calvin, you're a great dad, a great imagination connoisseur, and your son Braxton is exactly the kind of people that I hope are watching me when I'm 85 years old and still on YouTube. So thank you for this letter. Boy, it just warms my heart. So thank you for that. This one comes from, Emil Johansson. Hi, Rob. I want to talk to you about why Loki is a good show, but also why it's a bad show, because the reasons I believe Loki is a good show are also the reasons it's bad. I'm not going to spoil anything major. This is loosely talking about the themes presented from episodes 1 and 2, but it would be good if someone read the letter first and deemed it appropriate in a non-spoiler world. The show begins by stripping Loki from his timeline. This is not just a plot point, this is a metaphor. Loki was about, in his world, to ascend a throne. He probably knew he was a villain, but I think most people, even if they do bad stuff, never really view themselves as wrong. They're always the main character in their own stories. However, now Loki has to deal with the fact that he was only, according to the TVA, a plot point for the Avengers to get where they were. He is no longer the main character of his own story. This is not just something that someone tells him. If someone came up to you and told you that you were a cosmic mistake, those words have little meaning. But Loki is shown he's a nobody, Not a king, not a god, nothing. It's as if the biggest football star was forced to enter the world of hockey instead, and suddenly out of his element, he's shown to be garbage. And he can never go back to his life of being a football player. This is why I like the show, but also why people don't like the show. Loki has been an important character to people. He was a good villain even when people complained about the villains. Now he's not even important anymore. I like that. The show also spends a lot of time talking instead of people fighting in some extensive action scene. They just sit and argue their differences. This might seem really boring to people, but I love this. In an action movie, people are always so certain about what is important and what is not. Everyone has a specific motivation, and they know exactly what they want to do, no matter if it gets them killed. Now Loki, as well as the audience, is confused. And the only way to deal with this confusion is to talk and think. It's boring, but it is interesting. People have a hard time grappling with the fact what was the major plotline and so central in the MCU for a decade is now a paperweight in Loki. That makes you sad. It makes you wonder, well, what was the point then? People dislike that, but I love it, because that could happen in our world. People can fight for eternity over what seems so crucial and important, only to enter a future where nobody even cares about what you're fighting about. Are people mad? Or was it you who would die for something now so trivially wrong? This feeling of empty pointlessness is amazing. When this is shown, there was also a cross in that box, a Christian symbol. People have gone to war and murdered over tiny differences within Christianity that today's certain groups of people might not even remotely care about. What does that say? It's hard to draw a conclusion from it. It just makes you confused, and it makes you irrelevant. Loki is completely out of his element. All of his hopes and dreams and aspirations are all irrelevant now. Not just his friends or family are gone, but his enemies are not even there. Who is he when everything that defines him is gone? These are the thoughts that, when brought up, can make people mad. And for that reason, we don't usually bring them up, do we? Nobody walks up to a tiger and pokes him with a stick, right? Just like nobody wants to tell some murderous psychopath to his face that he's an idiot. We might think so, and the law might deem it so, but we don't actually act like that in our realm of social gameplay. So because of that, even bad people get a sense that they belong. Yet the TVA not only pokes Loki with a stick, they laugh at him while doing it. Except that Loki is the one now powerless to do anything about it. And this is so surreal, and yet it is real, and that's what makes me love this show. But it also makes people hate it. Thank you, Rob. Well, Emil, I like this letter. Look, I agree. And I think, when literally the universe has pulled you out of itself, well, the powers that be in the universe that you didn't even know were there, and have pulled you out and literally made you completely irrelevant to existence itself, well, that to me is the beginning of a great hero story, or at least the forging of a great villain story. And I really want to see where it goes. What is Loki going to do? Because Loki is still here. He hasn't been destroyed just as a yet another anomaly. We've seen what happens when that does happen to people. So what's going to happen? I don't know. But I am definitely there for it, and I'm really enjoying where Loki is going to go. But I think you point out that that it drives people a little crazy. I mean, I've never thought that it makes the Marvel Cinematic Universe irrelevant at all, because the entire Thanos saga still had to happen. They still had to win that battle. In that universe, that was something that was a big deal. And I thought it was really interesting. And I still think it's really interesting, and I'm loving the show. Loki is in the midst of his own search for meaning. I mean, literally, the universe has made him irrelevant. What is a god to do but to find that relevancy once again? I'm all in. Can't wait to see where it goes. So I'm with you. This next one comes from Gio Diaz. Second letter to you. The first one was Superman, Nature, Nurture, and Identity. I remember that. This shorter letter is about you. Yeesh. And your creations. Uh-oh. Well, Gio. Okay. Here we go. Hey, Rob. I wrote to you for the first time a few weeks ago. In my first letter, I laid out my character take on Superman. Nature, Nurture, and Identity. I've watched you read a lot of letters, and I was really taken aback by your reaction to mine. I could really tell how much it was making you think, live and on the spot. Since I wrote to you that first time, I came to find out that not only do you go deep on Superman, you also had serious involvement in a Superman film. Well, I'm writing to you today not to talk about Superman, but to talk about what led me to your podcast in the first place. I am a very serious classical geek. I'm slightly younger than you, 46 at the time of this writing, but we're close enough in age to share a love of all the same fandoms. I know we share a lot in common because you created one of my favorite films of all time, Free Enterprise. It was sometime in 2001. I'd walked into my living room after taking a shower and the TV was just on. I crossed over the kitchen to get something when I heard William Shatner speaking to a young child. I turned around just in time to catch Kick the Little Fucker's Ass. I sat mesmerized for the rest of the film. I'd never seen anything like it. A film about geeks with so many references. She just had to write her number on the first appearance of Gambit. Sandman number 8 too, a screed to desecrate. Gambit meaningful but affordable. Shatner at his best. Andy Kaufman copies Shatner's act, I swear to God. Track is what a train rides on. Trek is what the Enterprise goes on. Brilliant. Well, if I do say so myself. I fell in love with your film. I proselytized the movie to everyone I knew. I talked local cons into screening it, with the statute of limitations has run out on that one, but you got a lot of DVD sales from the legally questionable screenings. When you released a special edition with reference subtitles, I threw a viewing party at my house for 50-plus people. A friend of mine had to give a monologue for an audition, and I suggested the Brady Killer pitch speech. He got the lead role in a local play from that audition. Man, if you could get me the tape for that, I'll put it on the eventual Free Enterprise 4K disc. I can't believe that somebody did that, but I love that. I do not think that Free Enterprise was the best film ever made, but best and favorites are two different things. Your film is on my short list of favorites, along with Star Wars, Raiders, Superman, Smokey and the Bandit, oh, Dieter Bastian, The Adventures of Ford Fairlane, and Wrath of Khan. The movies I would need to survive if I was left on a deserted island, or more realistically, a pandemic lockdown. So please take some time and tell us about it. Reminisce and tell us what you think about it 20 years later. Tell us what your earliest ideas were and how you got to make all those references without getting into legal issues, how you directed someone to play you. Oh my God, how industry people reacted to it, how it helped or hurt your career. I want to hear all of it. Incidentally, I'm still waiting for William Shatner versus the World Crime League. Your work is not done, Mr. Burnett, and Shatner cannot resist aging for much longer. Or can he? Well, Gio Diaz, first of all, thank you. I very much appreciate the kind words for the work. I won't get into you know what? Maybe I'll do. I don't want to get into a whole thing about Free Enterprise because that would be a little self-aggrandizing, and obviously I have no problem being self-aggrandizing, but I think here people might get a little bored. But you know what? I might read this letter and turn it into its own piece on Free Enterprise. So that's what I'll do with this letter. I think it's a great letter, and a lot of people want to know, and so I'm going to turn that. I'll turn this into a standalone video piece that I'll put up, because I think it's a good way in, and plus your letter represents a lot of what people ask me. But I would say this. I mean, obviously my goal was to write and direct feature films, and at the time I had got a job. I'll tell you how it actually happened. So I had left my job at an ad agency where I was a predator. I was a producer editor of pieces of like commercials, promos, and I was working for a company, and I was in charge of doing the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather. So that was kind of my that was my beat, so to speak. And I had been doing a series of commercials for that CBS had signed off on that I actually came up with. All the ad agency had was a tagline, which was, "Have you seen your country today?" And this is after Connie Chung and Dan Rather sort of broke up. And all they had was a tagline, and I was new to the company, and they threw it my way. And I put together what's called a rip-o-matic. And a rip-o-matic is something you'd use in advertising where you take other people's commercials. So I was taking like David Fincher's TV commercials and Michael Bay's commercials because they had incredibly photographed material. and I put together a piece of a piece using Mike Oldfield's music from The Killing Fields, a piece of music from the soundtrack of The Killing Fields, and I cut this commercial spot together. I think the one I did, the proof of concept was like a minute, and then I had to do a 30-second spot, and a 20-second, and a 15, and a 10. And it was all basically bits of Americana, but all different walks of life, all these things that were happening. And my idea was all these things that were happening in one moment in time all across America. And then at the end, with beautiful, this sweeping emotional music, and then the graphic came up, "Have you seen your country today?" The CBS Evening News with Dan Rather. And I did it. It was the first thing I did for the company, and CBS signed off on it. And I did it almost, I want to say for almost a year. I did the different seasons. And then I ended up leaving the company over something really trivial, but that's a whole different crazy Hollywood story. But yeah, I ended up leaving the company, and I went off on my own as a freelance editor. And I had gotten calls to all kinds of different freelance calls, and I was working for a company called Triad Entertainment, and they hired me to edit a trailer, a coming attraction trailer, for a movie that was at the time called The Asphalt Quartet. And then they changed the name to Heist. It's never really come out here domestically. You can get like a DVD of it in Australia. So when I met the financier, who was kind of like very much a mobster-esque guy from New Jersey, Jewish mobster kind of, and I really liked him. He's like, "So what do you think of this movie, kid?" And I'm like, "It's terrible." I said the movie was terrible. And he goes, "What do you mean it's terrible?" I go, "Well, you let me." What I was given was I was told to come into the place where they'd cut the movie. So I had the whole movie in front of me and all of the dailies, and I was tasked on the same system to edit the trailer. So I had seen a lot of the film, and I said, "Not only is this movie horribly edited, but you didn't even use all the great footage that's available. You could make it better than it is. I mean, it was nigh unwatchable." And so he goes, "I'll tell you what. They loved my trailer." So he paid me for 2 weeks, pretty good fee for 2 weeks worth of work. And he goes, "Look, I'm not promising you anything, but you can do whatever you want to this movie for 2 weeks. You can recut it. You can do whatever you want. And if I like your cut better, I'll go with your cut of the film." Now, look, this movie was never going to be a great movie, but it was an interesting creative task, and they were paying me to do it. And it was the first time at this point, I had edited a few really low-budget indie features for first-time directors, and I'd worked with Peter Billingsley on Full Moon's Arcade. We recut the entire film Arcade. Arcade was the first feature I'd cut. So I come in there, and I basically lived in this edit bay, and I cut the movie for 2 weeks. I think I went home like every third day because I just didn't have enough time. Like, I would take cat naps. Like, if I had to sleep for 2 or 3 hours, I would. And then I'd get up and start cutting again. And I basically did that for 2 weeks. And I showed him the new cut of the film, and he goes, we're going with your cut of the movie. And I think I took something that was incredibly that was unwatchable, and I, again, made it really mediocre. But that mediocrity was definitely much better than what they had. So they went with my cut of the movie, which is great. And then after that, this character, this producer said, "Well, what would you like to do? I'd love to make your next movie, and you can direct it." And I'm like, huh. Well, I told him I've always wanted to make the Jewish Exorcist. And not like, what? The Jewish Exorcist? It wasn't like a Mel Brooks thing. I wanted to use Jewish folklore, the same way that vampirism, the vampire myth, is informed by Catholicism. I wanted to delve into Yiddish folk tales like the Yeni Welt, the Mirror Realm, and Asmodeus and Lilith and all that. And I had an idea. It was going to be called Day of Atonement, the movie. It's too late to be forgiven. And at the same time, Mark Altman, who I made Free Enterprise with, he was publishing Sci-Fi Universe magazine. And I had met Mark because I was a huge fan of his work. He used to do 100-page articles on each season of Star Trek The Next Generation. He reviewed every episode and wrote these extensive behind-the-scenes articles on every season. So that's how I met him. I became a fan of his, and then we became friends, and I was the critic at large for Sci-Fi Universe magazine, which was a magazine that he founded with Chris Gore that Larry Flint published. So we were all working for Larry Flint, and I was the critic at large. So I called Mark, and I said, "Hey, man, I have this opportunity to write a script and perhaps direct this film. Would you like to write it with me? Let's collaborate?" And it was basically the same week that Mark had been fired not really fired. It wasn't fired. They sold Sci-Fi Universe magazine out from under Mark. Larry Flint would sell any magazine that was non-pornographic, and like the Sci-Fi Channel picked it up because their magazine was our competitor, so they bought it. And Sci-Fi Universe magazine was no more, and that was the magazine for science fiction fans with a life. So he started writing this script, and to be honest, I mean, I was busy. Mark was doing more work on it than me, but I, we kind of came up with the whole idea together, and he would write some, I would write some. And right before we were going to... and I had gotten the job working on the Star Trek Experience. So I was editing all of the displays that you saw in the $80 million Star Trek Experience attraction. So I was working on that now. And Mark and I, the script that we had written for Day of Atonement was just not very good. There's way too many ideas in it. It was sprawling. It was all over the place. There's still a lot of ideas in it that I think were interesting. But it was just too much. And then Mark called me up one day. I was in the edit bay at Landmark Entertainment. I was in my edit bay, and Mark said, "So I wrote this thing. I want to read it to you." And it was a story from my own life. The day that Star Trek: The Motion Picture opened, and I was in 7th grade, and I was in junior high school. In real life, I got taken into the girls' bathroom and beat up by a 9th grader because I was dressed in a Star Trek uniform. Well, Mark wrote this scene. Instead of taking place in the girls' bathroom, it took place outside after school, where an older boy was beating me up, and after I get knocked out, I have a vision as I'm unconscious of William Shatner coming to me and offering me advice. And that's the scene that you asked about, kick the little fucker's ass, and when somebody has compared Han Solo to Captain Kirk, and Captain Kirk's like, he said Han Solo was better than Captain Kirk, and that's when William Shatner says, kick the little fucker's ass. So that, and therein we're like, you know what? We wrote this script, and it was originally called Trekkers. And instead of turning in Day of Atonement, we turned in this script called Trekkers because Swingers had come out, and we were basing it basically on Kevin Smith. It was kind of a combination of Clerks and Swingers was what made us believe we could actually make the movie. And we cast ourselves. I mean, we were going to play the main characters. Obviously, cooler heads prevailed. We cast actors, but we basically wrote a script about our lives, the ultimate Mary Sue wish fulfillment script where William Shatner was this imaginary friend that would help us out. It sort of went from there. But that's a long-winded way of answering one bit of your question. But so there you go. And that was the genesis of Free Enterprise. And they read that script, and we went from there. And it's a long, interesting story. You can actually see on the Burnettwork the making of Free Enterprise, the documentary that Jeff Goldsmith made. You can see that on the channel. So on the Burnettwork, go look up the making of Where No Fan Has Gone Before, the making of Free Enterprise. So check that out. Thanks for writing in, and I very much appreciate your interest in that. And yeah, so there you go. Thank you. Hopefully we'll be able to get a 4K disc out, a restored version of it out very soon. You can see clips. For those of you who haven't seen Free Enterprise, there are clips of Free Enterprise. I've sort of redone a little bit of a re-edit, and I recomposed the shots for 239:1. You can see that on the website, on my YouTube page, on the Burnettwork YouTube page. This one comes from Prestonian. Prestonian writes in and says, "Hey Rob, hope you had a terrific weekend. I know it's been a while since I wrote in, but I do intend to continue writing in regularly. Anyway, I had an observation about Endgame that you probably have already heard, or should I say, Robservation. Anyway, I know there are always some sort of plot holes with movies involving time travel, but there are a couple of things that just bothered me too much about the time travel concepts in Endgame. First off, when Tony Stark finds a way to control the flow of time in the quantum realm, does he both find a GPS device and a teleportation device? Because how can a microscopic organism the size of basically an atom be transported to another city to retrieve an Infinity Stone, much less Asgard, Vormir, or Xandar, which are all distant planets? Also, how can Nebula still be alive if the past version of her is murdered by Gamora? Anyway, there's too many inconsistencies, but I still did thoroughly enjoy this crescendo movie of the MCU saga. I also know that Disney writers admitted up front that these were holes. Anyway, this hardly takes away from the quality of the MCU, as even Kevin Feige himself realizes that there are holes, big or small, in every sort of storytelling. That being said, have a better day, Rob. You know, there's been a lot of people, Prestonian. First of all, thanks for writing in. Great letter. There's a lot of people who talk about the plot holes in Endgame, but you know what? How do we know how the quantum realm works? I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily traditional time travel the way we've come to know it, like say in a DeLorean. So it's different. That's why in my own mind I'm like, okay, do I think these are plot holes? I don't necessarily think so. I think there's just things that we don't necessarily understand about them. To me, nothing seemed to really contradict each other, and I'm really interested to see where Loki, which is dealing with a lot of these very things, if they're going to address some of this stuff. They already addressed some of it, so we're going to see where it goes. But that kind of stuff doesn't bother me. I thought Endgame was wildly ambitious, and it's amazing how much of that film worked like gangbusters. Did it work as good as Infinity War? I would say no, but it was trying to do a lot of different things. Infinity War was much more tightly focused. But I do think the 1-2 punch of Infinity War and Endgame are two of the great fantasy filmmaking or film-going experiences I've ever had. I was wildly entertained by both movies. Every time I put them on, I know they're only comic book superhero films. Do I hold them in the highest esteem the way I hold The Godfather? No, of course not, but they're not supposed to be. I really enjoyed my time there and watching those films, and I love them both. And so, yeah. But a great letter, and I want to thank you for writing in. So that was good. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. This letter comes from our agent in Japan. Our resident songstress, you know her as Lynn Hobday. A British expat in Tokyo who's recording music, putting it out, kicking ass, taking names. She's like, of all the people I've come to meet, she was early on here as part of the Post-Geek Singularity. I hope one day, again, to have many cups of warm sake with her on a cold Tokyo evening. So Lynn is here, and Lynn writes in. Lynn says, "Dear Rob, I hope you and the wonderful community are well. I haven't written in a while yet because you've been busy creating amazing stuff. I've been taking exams and experimenting with arts grants. To be quite honest, there are reasons that I haven't written as much over the last year. All paths lead to last year's Picard, Season 1. Oh, that it should have remained a single season to be dismissed and forgotten. But oh no, here we go again with Season 2. I have to admit, Q looked amazing in his new outfit in the recent teaser trailer, and in spite of her Irish accent, the female Romulan from the first 3 episodes of Season 1 was probably the best actor on the show. Picard left me feeling very triggered. I now understand the backlash that Star Wars fans felt over The Last Jedi. To be honest, I felt betrayed and somewhat cheated with Picard. Honestly, my soon-to-be 87-year-old father is more badass than Picard. So ageist. Moreover, we've been cheated of that hopeful vision, not without conflict, of course, of the future that Star Trek purveyed extremely successfully. It was the gold standard, and somewhere in my soul I truly believed in, and I was invested in that future. Now, we don't have that, unless I totally erase anything that has happened in the Star Trek universe since 2005. However, I really don't want to upset myself and dwell on the negative. I would prefer to rejoice in the uplifting values of what we were treated to for so many years. Less is more, because very often we have in our headcanon is actually more exciting than what we get. It's okay to leave our heroes in stasis. It's okay to have open endings. Which brings me to Friends. Very non-genre entertainment, and I know you personally never got into it, but it pretty much defined a lot of the experiences I had as a single gal in my 20s. And the bonds that I developed with my flatmate and peripheral friends have survived until the present day. What I have to praise this series for is that they signed off at a good time. They had the courage to leave us with a satisfying ending, letting fans imagine the future for themselves. Much kudos to the producers for allowing the recent reunion being a walk down memory lane rather than creating new content. Oh, how I wish that Star Trek, the original series ended with Star Trek VI, perfect ending. No need to know what happened to Kirk, which was very upsetting in Generations. The TV incarnation of TNG2 had a perfect ending. No need for movies. Pet peeve is that they use data for laughs. Deep Space Nine, devastating, but nonetheless moving with its open-ended conclusion. Can we please bring back open endings and leave the rest to the intelligence and imagination of the fans? Anyway, this is just a rant. Please keep the lantern burning, Rob. You are ever an inspiration. Best wishes, Lynn. Well, you too, Lynn, are an incredible inspiration. So you keep going. I think we definitely have a mutual admiration society, but I feel you. I mean, you know, the conclusion of all good things when Picard for the very first time comes in and finally realizes that it's okay for him to join his crew and play cards, was a big revelatory moment, I think, for Picard and for us, the audience. It was a beautiful, beautiful moment with Patrick Stewart dealing those cards, the camera pulling up and out of the Enterprise, and the Enterprise sailing off to its next adventure. What We Leave Behind, the DS9 finale, was also great, even though I have to say they Pocketbooks continued on with the post-DS9 and a post-Voyager canonical, well, they had their own canonical history of the universe, which is great, which is really, really good. If you chose to delve into the novels, I think they did a wonderful job, and the writers did a wonderful job telling post-Dominion War stories in both the Deep Space Nine and the Voyager universe and their larger universe. Great stuff. But listen, I agree with you. I think that leaving characters that have become beloved in pop culture, I think it's great to let them go off and have their own in our minds, their own adventures. You don't need to know all these things. And if you do, if you're going to bring these characters back, have a story to tell. Like I've said before, what I really hate about modern Star Trek is it's really just so far up its own ass. Star Trek is only about Star Trek itself. Star Trek is supposed to tell allegorical stories about we, the audience. But now it's only telling stories about the insular Star Trek universe. And it isn't allegorical as much as they might say it is. It's really not. I mean, they're bringing in the Borg, like you're given a Borg ship, Borg drones and all that, but what did that have to do with anything? Nothing. It was about nothing. You know, synthetic life forms, they've already done these stories and done them better way back when Next Generation was originally on the air. Picard is turned into an android. Literally, he dies and is turned into a robot, an android, a synth. And what is he supposed to do? Be a bridge between synths and humanity? Well, that's the dumbest thing in the world. And that story was already done on the original series in the first season in What Are Little Girls Made Of? The horror of what it means to be a human being trapped in apparently an immortal android body was portrayed in the original series as being horrific. That you've lost your humanity. And yet we move forward to 2020 when Picard was on, and we're given a Star Trek story that says, nope, that's preferable. Not a young, virile android body, but, lo and behold, the body looks just like Patrick Stewart. That didn't even make any sense. I mean, and that's where I think Star Trek falls down now, is it has no vision, it has no credibility, and it's terrible science fiction. But, you know, again, that's just my opinion. But Lynn, your mileage may vary. I very much appreciate your letter, but I love the idea of leaving our characters off on a good note and forever let our imaginations fill in what happened. But you know what? In our bankrupt, IP-driven, creative-less society, or creatively bankrupt society, all we're doing is resurrecting the corpses of these old franchises and, well, murdering them. I mean, it's shocking if you look at the Star Wars sequel trilogy and you look at what's happened to Star Trek since 2009, what they've done of it. And I really don't understand. Those are smart people, yet the drivel that they've served up has been inexplicably awful, and I don't get it. Speaking of that, Joe Dick writes in a letter. Joe Dick says, "Hi, Rob. Although Discovery's made a complete hash of everything, I particularly hate how they dealt with the Mirror Universe. I'm not sure if I remember all the Mirror Universe episodes from other Star Trek that well. They did a few in Deep Space Nine. I don't remember any from TNG. There weren't any. Enterprise handled it almost as badly as Discovery did. They depict a universe where the way ships are run, every officer and everyone else has to be constantly on guard, worrying on a daily basis about their subordinates making attempt on their life. I thought this was a wasted opportunity, especially in Discovery. In DS9, there's a scene when Jadzia explains a bit about how Klingon society operates, that there are rules for who can challenge whom, when, and why. Their society otherwise couldn't function. This isn't how the Mirror Universe operates, or at least how the Terran Empire operates. Everything really is that chaotic. But what evil empires in the real world were ever run that way? Even Nazis didn't have to worry about being offed all the time by their immediate subordinates. Sure, a bunch of them tried to kill Hitler, but that wasn't done at the drop of a hat. Caesar wasn't constantly on guard his entire career. It took a lot to provoke the other senators to kill him. There are plenty of examples in history of various kings, emperors, etc. being assassinated, but these instances are rare. It seemed like the Mirror Universe, especially in Discovery, was an opportunity to explore the benefits of empires and other societies that we find so offensive, like the totalitarian regime. In Star Wars, Luke asks Yoda if the dark side is stronger. He kind of avoids saying yes, it seemed, but said that it was faster and easier and more seductive. But ultimately, the light side was superior. Just not as sexy, I guess. It's the reason most people find the villain more interesting than the hero. The hero is too good. We can all identify with the motivations of the villain a lot more easily. Chuck Jones said that Daffy Duck was probably more like what most people really were. Bugs Bunny was how they wanted to be. I'll go out on a limb and say most of us prefer living in a democracy, but there are advantages to other systems. It's a reason that sideshow speech is funny. He rigs an election, but when he's found, he says that your guilty conscience may force you to vote Democratic, but deep down inside, you secretly long for a cold-hearted Republican to lower taxes, brutalize criminals, and rule you like a king. It's the reason the Chinese have a bunch of high-speed trains and the U.S. has none. I'd rather not have any than get them the way the Chinese went about it. They're not above testing out some of this CRISPR gene editing stuff when we won't, or won't yet. It's the reason in the Roman Republic they would elect a dictator in times of emergency. Sometimes you just need one dude, or I guess now chick, calling the shots. Sometimes there was no time for debate. But then until Caesar, you gave up being a dictator once the emergency was over. The economist Eric Weinstein said it was inevitable that Google would become evil because if you want to make billions in China, your options are to compromise your principles or to tell your shareholders you're not doing what you can to make them as much money as possible. Then you're out on your ass. Years ago, I read an article in The Economist talking about how the Russians and Chinese had figured out how to combine the benefits of capitalism with control over society of communism. People, they said, are inclined to look the other way on human rights issues when they're making money. You talked about this, Rob, when discussing why John Cena would make that apology, or Cena, pardon me, make that apology and why Disney would want to get in bed with the Chinese. It reminds me of when Bart asked Krusty how he could put his name to a shoddy product. Krusty's response, "They drove a dog truck full of money up to my house. I'm not made of stone." The checks and balances in a democracy seem to make it difficult to get much done, but at least it keeps a crazy nut job from doing anything too crazy. Of course, a democracy is preferable. There's the old cliche of it being the worst system except for all the others. But the Mirror Universe episodes of Discovery were an opportunity to show how the disadvantages of a totalitarian society outweigh the advantages. But there are advantages. I know the actors love doing those episodes. In Enterprise and DS9, you could see how much fun they had playing evil versions of their characters. Not that their mirror selves are supposed to be evil, just different. The original series handled it best, where Spock was a good man, or Vulcan, who was trying to survive in a bad system. And when he got the opportunity to help change it, he did. He wasn't evil. That's probably what it was like for good people in any bad society. It's not like everyone was a hardline Nazi in World War II Germany, or everyone loved having slaves in the American South, or in the ancient world where slavery was taken as a fact of life. We don't get any sense of this in the Mirror Universe. Dr. Phlox loved being an evil doctor. Mirror Philippa Georgiou loved being evil. On Memory Alpha, her entry has the quote right at the top, "I'm extremely wicked, even for a Terran." Evil people in the real world probably don't think they're evil. Discovery bashing is like shooting fish in a barrel, but I thought their missed opportunity with the Mirror Universe was particularly egregious. I'm interested to know what you think and the rest of the Post-Geek singularity. I guess it will be either right on testify or you're talking out of your ass. We'll see. Joe Dick. Joe, a great letter. I think you really nailed it on the head. I mean, nobody really has the Mirror Universe was turned into basically a cartoon. Whereas I thought that Mirror Mirror, which is one of my favorite episodes of the original series, and I have to say, what made it great was it was the only time we went to the Mirror Universe, and getting to see these alternate versions of the characters was interesting. But as you astutely pointed out, Spock was not an evil man. Spock was just different. This was a martial universe. Look, if everybody was killing everybody else, there never would have been a warp-capable civilization. And the Mirror Universe, as presented in Jerome Bixby's script for Mirror Mirror, has a Constitution-class Enterprise. It's a little bit behind our Enterprise technologically because it's, I guess it was non-canonical. It's canonical now that it basically is the pilot version, so it's a little bit behind us. But, I mean, the way it's presented, the Mirror Universe is presented, I don't think everybody was evil. As I like to say, they're antagonists. And yeah, Sulu and Chekhov, so you die, Captain, and we all move up in rank. No one will question the orders of a captain who has no one will question the assassination of a captain who's disobeyed prime orders of the Empire. All that. I can't get every quote exactly right all the time, but I think you're absolutely right. And I really think that, look, as much as I like the 2-part Enterprise episode In a Mirror Darkly from more of a talk about a nostalgia fanboy kind of a way. I mean, you got to see a Gorn, you got to see a Tholian, all that stuff. I liked all that. I mean, I thought it was, again, kind of ridiculous, but it was a whole lot of fun. And but you're absolutely right. I think they could have delved into the Mirror Universe. I mean, one of the things I find about Discovery is it's a really dumb show. I mean, it's very ham-fisted, and it's written. It's looking for meaning at like the 7th grade level, and I think all of the writing is particularly. It's really, to me, it's embarrassing because there's no subtlety, there's no nuance, there's no real insight, and there's no real intelligence behind it. I see all of it is cliche, and it's lowest common denominator writing. And that was never true of Star Trek and for the Next Generation. Even when episodes were horrible, like somebody's always bringing up the Plato's stepchildren and all the stuff, that the shenanigans that the Plutonians put Kirk and Spock through, and how weird it looks to our eyes now. But the idea behind the Plutonians themselves and what they were doing was really interesting. And there was a lot going on there. It was bad. You don't want Kirk going and pretending he's a horse as our little person Alexander rides him. I mean, yeah, that's pretty weird, and I think to modern audiences are going to be like, what the hell is this? But overall, the episode had some very interesting things in it and interesting things to say. It's just, it got to be pretty outlandishly stupid. But yeah, with the Mirror Universe, it's just like, everyone's evil. And that's not what it should have been at all. And they had a real opportunity to upgrade the idea of what the Mirror Universe was, but that would require sophisticated writers writing on a very sophisticated level, which I have not seen at all in Star Trek Discovery. It is very obvious. It is very ham-fisted. There's no grappling with actual real science fiction concepts done in a unique way. It's all these sort of half-baked ideas that are thrown out on the screen without any development. So it doesn't surprise me, but I feel the same way you do, Joe. It really was disappointing. But you know what isn't disappointing? Willow Yang. Willow Yang has written in another letter. Yes, she has. Willow Yang writes in and says, "Greetings, Rob. I am writing to discuss Cogenitor." Amen. One of my favorite episodes of Star Trek Enterprise. I am writing to discuss Cogenitor, one of the best and also one of the most maddening episodes from Enterprise I've seen thus far. To give a recap, the Enterprise crew encounters an alien ship, the Vissians, and while investigating a hypergiant star. The Vissians appear to be a very friendly and cordial race, and are happy to mingle with the Enterprise crew. Archer becomes fast friends with the Vissian captain, while Trip is introduced to his own counterpart, a Vissian engineer who is apparently trying to have a baby with his wife. It was there that Trip learns that the Vissians apparently have 3 different sexes. The third sex, known as the cogenitor, makes up a tiny fraction of their population and is regarded by the rest of the Vissians as being nothing more than a broodmare who's passed from couple to couple to help them conceive children with no autonomy or agency of their own, and aren't even given names. Trip, however, discovers that the cogenitor is apparently just as intelligent and capable as the other 2 sexes, and starts teaching them to read as well as showing them the day the Earth stood still. The cogenitor eventually realizes that they are unhappy living in Vissian society and requests asylum. The other Vissians are offended by Trip's meddling, and Archer ultimately sides with them. The cogenitor commits suicide, and Archer angrily censures Trip for causing him all of this trouble. The end. So, the ending of Cogenitor did leave a rather bad taste in my mouth. Before I discuss that, however, I will say that I absolutely loved the moral quandary that was presented in this episode. I don't know if the writers were directly inspired by The Handmaid's Tale, but there are definitely some uncanny similarities between the Vissian society and their treatment of the cogenitors, and in the manner in which women are treated in Gilead. In both cases, there's a group of people that are being denied education, denied any rights or autonomy, and are passed from one couple to another to be used for the sole purpose of reproduction. Of course, the metaphor doesn't have to be just limited to sexism, but to any form of systemic oppression and abuse of a group. But what makes Cogenitor particularly compelling to me, however, and what differentiates it from a more didactic morality play like Stigma, is that it isn't the Vissian oppression of the cogenitor that is the primary focus of the debate. Rather, it's whether the main characters have the right to, firstly, judge the society, and secondly, intervene. And these are questions that I believe are incredibly more fascinating and engaging. I agree. The first question has to harken back to the age-old debate of moral relativism versus moral absolutism. Should we be able to judge the morality of other cultures who have different norms and standards from us? Personally, I would say both yes and no. Every culture, including ours, has a lot of traditions and norms that seem very arbitrary and illogical. One example would be the Cretaceans, who apparently find eating in public to be strongly offensive and indecent. We as humans may find that to be absurd, and the Denobulans may in turn find our general adherence to monogamous relationships to be absurd. In those types of instances, I don't really think there's anyone who's in the right or wrong. We just have to acknowledge that we all come from different backgrounds and are raised with a limited set of worldviews and beliefs. However, I do think that there are also traditions and practices that are, at the very least, very difficult to dismiss as simply being a difference in culture. Is it possible to make the claim that practices such as genocide, slavery, honor killing aren't wrong, but are just the norms of a society that's different from ours? Can culture and tradition be used to justify slavery in the antebellum South? Can culture and tradition be used to justify the systemic imprisonment and rape of women in Gilead? While I'm not personally a moral absolutist, I do think that at least some degree of moral universalism exists, and there are practices that we simply cannot excuse as just being another culture's. And I do think that the Vissian society's treatment of the third sex in Cogenitor was presented in a manner that is meant for the audience to find morally reprehensible. The Vissians try and claim that human characters don't understand them, but unlike, say, the Kalons in Next Generation's Half-a-Life, failed to present any argument to justify those practices. This brings me to their practices. This brings me to the second question that is posed by Cogenitor. If there is a practice in another culture that is morally wrong, perhaps objectively so, what should be done about it? On one hand, I don't think that we should be policing other people. Such attitudes, I think, are arrogant and imperialistic. Invading other sovereign states and enforcing our values and beliefs onto other societies have often proved to be disastrous and done nothing but further worsen a situation. On the other hand, if there's a state that's carrying out genocide like Nazi Germany, is it right for us to just stand by and watch? There has been much criticism of foreign powers over their failure to intervene during the Rwandan genocide. Is it moral to stand back and do nothing while countless innocent lives are at stake? In the specific case of Cogenitor, I do actually think that it would have been better for Trip to have not initially gotten involved with the titular character. It was a little dense of him not to have considered the obvious problems that would arise from his actions. However, once the Cogenitor themselves have decided they no longer want to be with the Visians and has requested asylum, I do think that the Enterprise has a moral duty to aid them. Archer sending the Cogenitor back against the latter's explicit wishes really did not sit well with me. In short, I really loved most of Cogenitor. I loved the moral quandary. I loved that the episode was subtle and nuanced in the depiction of the Visians, presenting them as a seemingly polite society with an ugly underbelly. And I really liked that they refrained from having some romance between Trip and the Cogenitor, since it's already been done in The Outcast. And TNG's The Outcast. I did, however, take issue with the final scene, where Archer decided to take Trip to task after the Cogenitor committed suicide. It would be one thing if it was T'Pol who lectured Trip on non-interference. Archer freed a bunch of Suliban prisoners from a Tandarian camp in Detained. He has likely instigated a war with some terrible, poorly thought-out lies in The Communicator. He got into a space battle with the Klingons after aiding a group of defectors, or rebels, depending on whose side of the story you believe, that were fleeing from the Empire in Judgment. Aren't those all instances of interference? Heck, the Klingons were still pursuing him in The Expanse, not the series, but the episode, forcing him to blow up one of their ships. Why didn't he agonize and self-flagellate himself over having killed a bunch of people because he decided to interfere in their affairs? It is extremely hypocritical of him to get angry at Trip when he himself has repeatedly done far worse and antagonized many more races. While I do agree that there is a good debate to be had over what should have been done in the situation, and as I've mentioned earlier, I do personally think that in hindsight it would have been better if Trip had left the Cogenitor alone, I found Archer's reaction to be completely lacking in any nuance or self-awareness. When Archer said to Trip, "I might have expected something like this from a first-year recruit, but not you. You did exactly what I'd do." If that's true, I've done a pretty lousy job setting an example around here. I just wanted to shout at the screen, "Yes, you have done a lousy job, you hypocritical a-hole. After the series of first contact blunders you've made, this is where you decide to draw the line? You're as much to blame for the Cogenitor's death after you chose to deny them asylum. Take some goddamn responsibility." Live long and prosper, Willow. You know, Willow, I'm kind of the opinion that anybody who's writing modern Star Trek should read all of the letters you've written to this show in analyzing all the Star Trek episodes, because I think you have a far more interesting take going through Star Trek for the very first time. Perhaps maybe the most legitimate take ever of the modern day of anybody who has covered Star Trek. I mean, really, I think that, look, if anybody out there happens to be watching from Paramount or something, go to the Burnettwork.net website and look up Willow Talk, and please read every one of Willow Yang's letters about Star Trek, her analysis of various episodes, because the fact that she can write such nuanced and insightful and compelling letters about Star Trek, that's what you want people to do with your shows and your movies. But you know what? No one ever will. I mean, actually, that's probably not true. But they're certainly not going to be as insightful as Willow's are. And again, she's an actual doctor. So Willow Yang, once again, kudos to you for an amazing letter. And again, another person I really just want to one night get hammered with and talk Star Trek philosophy for into the wee hours of the evening. That would be a lovely time. So thank you, Willow, for that. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the great things about great Star Trek episodes is whether you are mad about them. I mean, the ideological concepts, if you're getting angry, but you're also contemplating, you're being contemplative of an episode after it's over, and then you decide to write, you put fingers to a keyboard and write a letter like this, that means Star Trek did its job. And for me, as a child, going back to Calvin Bowe's letter, Star Trek left me thinking, I mean, not quite as insightfully as you are here in this letter, but when I was 5 and 6 and 7 years old watching Star Trek and having my father read the James Blish novelizations of the episodes to me, or finally poring over the photo novels and watching the animated shows, I came away from Star Trek episodes having these kinds of thoughts. I would think about Star Trek episodes for days, if not weeks, if not decades. I mean, the better part of half a century now, but that's what makes Star Trek good. And I find that since 2009, I've been summarily rejecting Star Trek because it's so brain dead and stupid, and it doesn't make any sense at all. And look at this: 45 minutes of Cogenitor is more compelling than 3 seasons of Discovery and 1 episode of Picard. And they spent close to $1 billion on those 4 shows. Was it worth it? I don't think so. 1 episode of Star Trek Enterprise, Cogenitor, is more compelling than 4 seasons of their gobbledygook that they've served up. So Willow, once again, thank you for a fantastic letter. I very much appreciate it. Let's see what's next. William La Rochelle, our friend William La Rochelle, is in the house. Rob in the PGS, hi. Listening to Short Takes number 77 about J.J. Abrams, I'm compelled to respond with a letter that may not reach you because it breaks a rule. There's a huge factor overlooked when people compare the box office of The Force Awakens and that of the Rise of the Revise of Skywalker, The Last Jedi. I know you like it, whether or not you consider it a good Star Wars movie, but in the same way that it soured many fans from giving Lucasfilm any money for Star Wars, a Star Wars story, it also lingered long enough to keep fans home when Episode 9 arrived. It will be nice to learn someday who didn't allow J.J. Abrams to pursue an idea. Just as maybe the fan base for Harley Quinn deserves to know a name when it comes to DC declares that Batman cannot sing the 60s Batman theme song between Catwoman's legs because heroes don't do that. I mean, it's not like fans or even YouTubers feared by marketing departments and millionaire directors can actually harm whoever is named as the suit who makes a stupid ruling. But one day it would be nice to know who decided it does not matter that Lando obliterated the Endor Death Star and that only dust or cinders would have remained. This brings me to the controversial point. Even though we do not know the division of labor among the many credited producers during the Amblin years, there was a measure of goodwill extended to Kathleen Kennedy by 2012. I still say that, in many respects, maybe the Mayan apocalypse happened, but it just wasn't as depicted as it was in the Roland Emmerich movie. It might just have been a devastation in the form of pop culture sacrificed on the woke altar. When we look at art generated for The Force Awakens that indicates moments from Lucas's original outlines, we have to remember that some of those are just the artists riffing and creating images that might have ended up as scenes. Kennedy told a Japanese interviewer that Lucas's outlines were just a few paragraphs. Many of us would be eager to find out whether that is factual. Somebody in authority certainly could have hired a better story group and could have put some limitations on the creative freedom of Rian Johnson. Somebody told JJ that Luke could be a myth they don't see until the end of Episode 7. Before that, somebody told Michael Arndt that Luke Skywalker as an active character was distracting from the new characters. Definitely sometime between JJ going for a walk with his iPhone breaking story with Lawrence Kasdan and whatever draft they started shooting with mystery box format was the fallback position. But I find it fully that YouTubers, especially even today, refer to Luke as running away for 30 years when the Disney timeline says Kylo was 23 when he destroyed the Jedi Temple and 29 in The Force Awakens, so Luke would have been gone for 6 years tops. It's also odd that people say Han is depicted as a deadbeat dad when he was obviously there and involved until his 23-year-old son went on a rampage and fled. Whoever told Michael Arndt Luke was distracting, and whoever told JJ Luke would be a myth is the person who knocked over the first domino that determined the trilogy would collapse. And it may well be the same person who certainly would have been getting daily reports from the set of Solo indicating how much overtime they were clocking each day to indulge improvisation, but who might have been so used to giving space to the best director in the world that the hands-off policy was extended maybe too broadly. JJ seems like the type who got his position by playing ball. Somebody mandated that Han, Luke, and Leia would not be in the same scene. Somebody publicly said, "We don't owe anything to the original fans." somebody pulled the trigger on shunning Gina Carano from Star Wars. We can go around in circles over the mystery of how the Disney trilogy happened. I doubt Bob Chapek or Bob Iger gave the matter much thought after The Force Awakens was a financial hit. If I were a Disney shareholder, I might want blood. But I'm sure Lucas, as a major shareholder, has his own concerns. The good news, perhaps, is that he likely knows who is the real problem. I'm not sure what the rest of us would do with that information other than shrug and say, I told you so. JJ will keep getting work whether we like it or not, but I also don't put all the blame at his feet. That's from William La Rochelle. Well, William, I have to tell you, I don't necessarily think it was one person. I think it was a general, it was probably born out of a lot of discussions. Like, I am sure someone in the Disney marketing department could have said something like, remember, Disney marketing is all powerful as well. And Disney marketing is like, wait a minute, you're going to give us Star Wars and you're not going to give us young new characters that we can promote. You're going to give us a bunch of over-the-hill, way beyond middle-aged actors like Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford's a good one, but Luke Skywalker, Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill and all those people. That's what we're supposed to market? The marketing department, I bet, had say and said, you can't do that. We have to have new characters. We have to have new characters that we can slap on everything. We can't have old characters from 30 years ago. We can't do that. And I understand that. And I'll bet you that played a big part. So Kathleen Kennedy was trying to do the best thing she could. If you really look at what she was trying to do, she was trying to hire good people. Like, look, you have to remember that in Hollywood, people want to be able to hire somebody who's able to make a studio movie that makes money. And as far as J.J. Abrams is concerned, he directed 2 films for Paramount that were part of franchises, Mission Impossible and Star Trek, and he did fine, according to them. They weren't disasters, which makes him he gets to join a very rarefied club. 3 studio pictures for previously existing franchises, and according to a lot of people, he did a good job. At least the studio was happy with the job that he did. Now, we as fans, I'm not. I certainly am not. I think Mission Impossible 3 looks like a TV movie, and of course you know my thoughts on Star Trek 09 and Star Trek Into Darkness. But still, as far as Hollywood is concerned, he's able to finish a $175 million movie on time, I think not too over budget. So the studio's like, okay, well, who's the best person that we can get to do Star Wars? It was a smart hire. Kathleen Kennedy oversaw that. Yeah, it's a smart hire. And I think that's what people don't quite understand. Rian Johnson was a smart hire, too. A director that's made a lot of really interesting indie films. He's even delved into science fiction and things like Looper. He directed great episodes of Breaking Bad, which is one of the great television shows of all time. He also has a good pedigree. He looks like a good hire. Even you've got your 2 characters who were hired to direct Solo, coming off of 21 and 22 Jump Street. They're good hires too. But the thing is, the judgment, the way these judgments were made at the studio level seemed like it was ideal. But I wonder if someone sat down and said, hey, we're going to do a lot of improv. Kathleen Kennedy is used to having people that know what to do. She doesn't micromanage Steven Spielberg's creativity when she was producing his films. What she does is make sure Steven Spielberg has exactly what he needs to make his movies, just like a good producer does. That's what Kathleen Kennedy did. Hire people that she thought were the best at what they were doing, and it turned out not to work out. Colin Trevorrow, they should have gone with his script, but Carrie Fisher died. I'm sure that wasn't easy. Josh Trank, they thought, hey, after Chronicle, what a new great voice that we can use. Gareth Edwards doing Rogue One after Godzilla seemed like a good hire. So Kathleen Kennedy actually made a lot of good, unique, new, up-and-coming director choices that should have worked out pretty well for her. And if they had, nobody would have talked about what had happened. But you know what? She hires the directors. She trusts them to deliver what they say they can deliver. And I think things went a little awry that way. But she's not somebody who is used to stepping in halfway through a production or replacing anyone. That's the hardest thing in the world to do. So that's why I don't sit and put the blame at Kathleen Kennedy's feet. I think Disney had a lot of different agendas driven by the marketing, driven by their need to make $4 billion back as fast as they could, and of course have this viable franchise. What's pretty unique about everything now too is, so their sequel films might not have worked out. I think everyone can agree that Rogue One is probably, and even Rogue One isn't perfect, and that was something that was internally generated at ILM, which is unique. How funny that somebody who actually loved Star Wars came up with that idea. So, cool stuff. But yeah, I don't know. Great letter, though. I very much appreciated that letter. Let's see where we are in the grand scheme of things with all of you. You guys, a lot of things have been sent in today. Let's see what those things are. Let's go over to you, kids. Louis Terrazas is here. I finally got to meet Louis. He came on the show. I put you in, coach. Louis says, Rob, have me on for just 5 minutes and I will break down exactly why In the Heights was never going to make dollars. And remember, I'm Hispanic and had an apartment in the Heights, so I know what I'm talking about. It was never a no-brainer. Mance schooled you all. That would be this morning on the John Campea show. Well, thanks for that, Louis. Maybe you will be coming on Midnight Metal. I wasn't necessarily prepared to do anything today on this show as far as the audience is concerned. Although maybe you can twist my arm. But yeah, I would be curious to hear your analysis. Why not? Willow sends in a tip. I know that you enjoy making fun of Manifest, but would you actually recommend people who haven't seen the series, like myself, to watch it? Is it so bad that it's good? Listen, I don't think Manifest is so bad that it's good. It's actually a well-produced show. It looks good. I really like the actors. It's a handsomely mounted show. So it's not so bad it's good at all. There's an earnestness to Manifest that I think is laudable. It's the crazy writing, and to me, it had what I called an impossible premise. The premise works, and then every time you keep adding to that premise, it is more and more and more ridiculous. And I think the problem is, ultimately, you can only go down a few roads with your premise, and they all kind of lead to the same place. And yet that same place is going to be, you can't explain it all. You can only insinuate it's God or angels or some shit like that. So it ultimately, and the reality of it, the actual plot mechanics and what's happening in the show, I just don't buy. I don't buy for the same reason. Now, some things, like I've talked about on this show a lot, like The Ring, for instance, whether you're talking about Ringu, the original Japanese version, or The Ring. And I'll state it again because I haven't talked about it in a while, but I'm going to talk about why I find that The Ring, if you really run down what's happening. So you have this disturbed girl for various reasons that was able to psychically imprint a videotape with this dream imagery before she was drowned in a well and she died. Right? That's an oversimplification, but the point is she's dead. So what happens in this movie, we've all seen The Ring, right? If the videotape is put in a VCR in some cosmic waiting room or wherever, Samara, or Sadako, if you go by the Japanese version, this entity who was killed is sitting in the afterlife somewhere, and when someone watches her video cassette, somewhere in the cosmic infinitude of the afterlife or hell or heaven, we don't know where, a light goes off. Ding, 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 ding. Someone's watched your videotape with your psychically projected imagery on it. And then Sadako, or Samara, then from the afterlife, wherever her spirit is residing, gets to pick up a phone or the equivalent and call the person who just watched the videotape. How they're connected, how this afterlife is connected to Ma Bell, I don't know. But suddenly you pick up the phone and you hear Samara's voice on the other end calling from the afterlife. 7 days. Now I can only imagine that Samara is now sitting there, or Sadako is sitting there, and she starts a stopwatch that is going to count down 7 days. And after 7 days happen, then she's going to come get you. She's going to crawl out of the TV's going to turn on. When the next time you're just sitting there, maybe you're reading a book, maybe you're watching TV, I don't know. But then she's going to come out. Her spiritual self is going to literally crawl out of the TV and do whatever it does to take your life. Well, if you think about this, this is basically what happens in The Ring. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous what happens. I mean, come on. You're in the afterlife with all this connection to corporeal technology, and you're waiting. You're actually timing when it's been, the devil's talking. Lucifer's like, Sadako, I'm talking about souls of the damned. And she's like, Luce, just hang on a second. The 7 days are up. I got to go scare somebody to death. Hold on. And then she goes and comes out and kills the person who's watched the videotape. I mean, all of that, if you think about it, it's ridiculous. However, the skill by which Nakata and then later Gore Verbinski make you believe, Hideo Nakata, the director, make you believe. You never stop when you're watching The Ring or Ringu. You never stop and think about how, wait a minute, this is completely ridiculous. You don't think about it. It's got a completely ridiculous premise. But because it's done so well, you never stop and go, well, come on. How does she know it's been 7 days? What is, in the afterlife, she's looking at a clock? She knows you watched a videotape? Like what? How does she know? I mean, all these things, if you think about them, ridiculous, but you don't. You don't think about them. That's why they're awesome. You buy it. Well, in Manifest, the problem that I have with Manifest is, okay, a plane has gone through a rift in time. So the people, when the plane lands, it's traveled 5 years into the future, or it's just shown up 5 years late. And all the people on the plane were considered dead 5 years prior. And they have that, and then acclimating to their lives, finding out some people's spouses moved on and got remarried. I mean, what would it be like if in a blink of an eye you went forward, kind of like when Thanos snapped his fingers, you go forward 5 years in time and all of your loved ones thought you were dead. And you walk in that front door and your mom, did she have a heart attack? How would people acclimate to your presence? And more importantly, how would you acclimate? That in itself is an interesting premise. But then again, you have to ask yourself, why did this happen? What caused it? Can it happen again? All part of Manifest. But that's not where it ends. Then Manifest asks you to believe that somehow people are starting to get what are called callings, where they're having visions of people that they don't even know somewhere in vicinity, and they've got to find those people and save those people from, I guess, a fate worse than death. And these things are correlated, the travel through time. So, first of all, the Touched by an Angel meets the Odyssey of Flight 33 from the Twilight Zone, or whatever you want to call it. Those two things, one of those things could have worked, but then they turned it into this thing that can only be, my whole thing about the Manifest deal is that these callings, that means somebody is out there in the cosmic space, whether it's God or whether it's his angels or whatever, and they're all involved in everyone's lives, and they're like, ooh, I want this passenger on plate 858 or whatever, I want this person to go, maybe if they can make it in time, because they have to follow their calling, to go save this person that they don't even know. That seems like a pretty dumb idea, Heaven, but yet when you're watching Manifest, you're watching this and you get into it. And then the mysteries that are coming about, you're like, okay, I'll follow these. I was watching it only because I wanted to see. I knew that it was going to turn into monstrous amounts of gobbledygook. But I was curious to see where the writer's going to go. Are you going to give me an interesting science fiction, horror, fantasy premise that I'm going to believe in? No, as it turns out. The gobbledygook, like with Lost, just got piled higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. And the direction they're going to go, you can't answer those questions because they're impossible to answer, because it always comes back to God or religion or some weird, there's people out there watching us. It's all, there's nothing you can do about it. That's the premise they chose for themselves. But I loved it because I'm like, okay, how far are they going to go? Like one day they just find one of the characters actually was in a mountain. He was hiking and you went into a cave and he went through the same kind of rift in time, but it only lasted a year. And he was in a cave. He wasn't on an airplane. Like they randomly pulled that out of their ass. And it's like, what? And that's why I like Manifest, is because I wanted to find out what more gobbledygook they were going to throw my way and would I believe it? So, by the way, I did hear back from Manifest creator Jeff Rake, who did say he would agree to do an interview. So, I told him, we could do it live or pre-recorded. I said, normally I'd be doing these 2-hour deep dive interviews with people. And he said, well, that's pretty intimidating. He said he was intimidated. That's what he said. And that if I could do 15 minutes with him, would that be okay? Well, yes, Jeff Rake, if you happen to see this, by God, sir, I don't care how long. I just want to talk to you about Manifest, and I appreciate you taking me up on my offer. Let's make this stuff happen. He is available on Twitter, so recommend to him on Twitter, Jeff Rake. Find out where he's at and tell him he should talk to me. I did send him my interviews with David Goodman, the current WGA president, and Brian Fuller, so he could see the kind of questions that I ask. Mr. Intellectual says, Sir Rob, Job 3:14, with kings and counselors of the earth who built for themselves cities now in ruins. As I told you before, there are no auteurs anymore. Spielberg has been tossed aside in this go-go new Hollywood. The goal is to keep making his own films. I agree with that. And Mr. Intellectual goes on and says, and once more, Sir Rob, Reed Hastings is cutthroat. Quote, I will rape those before they can even try and rape me. Did he really say that? I haven't seen that. Actually, is that a quote that was in public? I'm gonna Google this right now and see if that's a real quote. Let's see, Mr. Intellectual. Let's see if that's truly a quote from Mr. Hastings. Let's see. Does he say that? I don't know. It doesn't pop up. It doesn't pop up. So I can't. I don't know if I can go there. Keep doubting them, but this war will not end so quick. Well, Sir Rob, how can we ever go back after these changes? Do you see any hope? Well, I mean, there's always hope. Look, here's the thing. At the end of the day, all of these kinds of measures and the great thing is people always like great stories. And look, the Anne Boleyn thing that just aired in Britain when they actually cast a black woman to play Anne Boleyn didn't work. No one watched it. So in terms of those things, I mean, these things will all work themselves out because ultimately people want great stories well told. And again, people are now approaching storytelling with an agenda. And if your agenda isn't to tell a great story with great characters, you will always lose because agenda-driven storytelling, you have to work on your characters first. Rod Serling might have had an agenda, but he told great stories. And even when Twilight Zone episodes weren't that great, because, you know, he wrote a lot of them, they still concentrated on starting out with characters and a premise and a story, and they usually did a good job. Yes, a lot of his stories were heavy-handed and did have an agenda, but it was always story-driven. It was always character-driven because you had to have a character. You had to give us a character, and you had to get that character into our heads in the first 5 minutes. Watching Twilight Zone is a master class in learning how to tell stories. And I think, you know, unfortunately, people don't read them as much as or watch them as much as they used to. Chris C. says, hey, Rob, I also missed out on that Jaws 2 Steelbook. I'm so pissed. I check Zavvi all the time, and I could swear it wasn't there last week. Like, it wasn't, Chris. What Chris is saying is that I'm a huge Jaws 2 fan, and I don't normally collect Steelbooks, but I have a 4K Jaws Steelbook. Zavvi is putting out Jaws 2. I think it's just a Blu-ray Steelbook, but it's really cool. And I've always loved Jaws 2. I saw Jaws 2 in the theater when it first opened. I have a soft spot, and Zavvi had a Steelbook, and it's awesome, but it's sold out too quickly. Mexican Iron Man is here. We all love Mexican Iron Man. Mexican Iron Man says, hail, Rob. I don't think even Spielberg coming back to the fray with Netflix excites me. I still blame Steven Spielberg and JJ and all the rest that his mentorship into Hollywood created and destroyed, especially Kurtzman. Example, Kurtzman. Yeah, look, you know what? I mean, don't blame Steven Spielberg for getting people like J.J. Abrams into the business. I believe Spielberg, it was either Spielberg or Lucas hired, I think it was Spielberg who hired him when he was like 16 to do some documentary project with him. I can totally understand that. But, I mean, you know, no one is their brother's keeper. And we got a lot of, I mean, I would dare say there's a lot of great TV that came out of Bad Robot and J.J. Abrams, but, of course, none of it stuck the landing, really. I don't know how Person of Interest ended. But Alias, I never saw a show get wrecked after one episode when they took down SD6, when Ron Rifkin was out as Sloan, you know, that the Super Bowl episode. That was the end of that show, even though it went on more. Lost, again, the biggest audience betrayal in television history was the last season of Lost. Now, that doesn't mean you can like it if you want, but I think it was a betrayal of everything they set up. And certainly the end of it was. No, they're not in purgatory. Okay. But, yeah, give Spielberg a chance. Sends in a diamond super chat sticker, so thank you for that. By the way, and she's my new official co-host on Midnight Metal on Fridays. So join us for that. Roger H sends in a super chat. Probably, I bet you sent me another sticker. I always forget to look at that when I'm talking. Terrier says, I saw Catherine Trammell twice today in 4K, both in The Last Action Hero and Basic Instinct. I saw more of her in the latter, though. Poor Wayne Knight. Yeah, poor Wayne Knight. Justin Toner says, Rob, by the way, you know, everyone's the 4K Basic Instinct is out. A lot of people, especially Blu-ray.com, and I, of course, mentioned about the teal. Blu-ray.com talks about the cyan and how it's the European labs, when they're remastering things, Studio Canals kind of had a problem with their color timings, and I wish they would get, even though they said Paul Verhoeven was involved, I'll have to look at it in HDR and make my final decision, but I'm not the only one complaining about the 4K, but it still looks great. The disc is very sharp. It looks incredible. Justin Toner, one of our mods, says, Rob, how long did it take your brain to recover from the news of Vinegar Syndrome planning to release Flesh for Frankenstein in 4K and 3D this year? Paul Morrissey's Flesh for Frankenstein in 4K and 3D is insane. Andy Warhol presented that movie. I can't believe that they're releasing it that way. That's amazing. Amazing. Vigilante Williamson sends in a super chat and says, you're more successful than the bully money. Well, thank you very much, Vigilante Williamson. I very much appreciate that. Yeah, I like to think so. You know, I'm sure he's having a good life, but what can you do? Sheriff Carl says, I watched Affliction. Was that the Abel Ferrara film? Watched Affliction yesterday for the first time in 20-ish years. Man, James fucking Coburn was the man. Dude was even here in Seattle to carry Bruce Lee's casket to the grave. What a badass gentleman and friend. What are some of your favorites of his? Well, I mean, you know, his two... I love the Flint movies because I love James Bond. Our Man Flint and In Like Flint. A big fan. Hey, James Coburn was in Looker. And you know his son, James Coburn IV, was actually my sound recordist, recorded all the dialogue in Free Enterprise. So, yeah, I mean, James Coburn, what a career that guy's had. But the first things I really noticed him in was probably that when he was the star was Our Man Flint. I just loved his voice. I love James Coburn's voice. I could listen to that guy talk forever. Absolutely. Stubble McShave says, I have Star Wars episodes 1 through 6 on physical media. I never bothered to get the sequel trilogy. Yesterday I was browsing Disney Plus and I thought I'd check out the behind-the-scenes docs. To my surprise, the special features can't be found on Disney Plus. Do you know why? I can still watch on my discs. I do not know. I do not know. I do not know why. But probably because like the special features weren't done in they weren't done in high def. That's the problem. Why is my Tron documentary not on Disney Plus? It's not in high def. They don't want to put anything that's not in high def on, which I think is a huge mistake. But what can we do? I mean, preserve our legacy, man. Our friend Electron Star Collapse is here. Electron Star Collapse says, Rob, I finally finished Star Trek Picard. My head still hurts from the experience. I'll write a full review if you're interested. Oh, yes, Electron Star Collapse. But I fear that once you watch Star Trek Picard, that the stars will collapse on you. So watch out for falling stars. I don't want your head to hurt. So there you go. We got to meet Electron Star Collapse for the first time, face to face. It was good to see you. And yeah, so I'd love to read your review of Picard. Stubble McShave is back and says, how many episodes do you think it will take Q to change his appearance to that of another actor? I give John Delancey 2 episodes before he was replaced by another actor. God, I don't know if they might. They might do that. I don't know. I mean, why bring him back if you're going to do that? I don't know. I don't know. It's tough to say. Will he go the distance or will he be replaced? It's a good question. Darth Plato says, moral absolutism is a loaded term by people to influence people toward moral relativism. A more neutral term would be moral objectivism versus moral subjectivism. Well, I love that. I love that. Consider if subjectivism is true, then heroes like Schindler, Frederick Douglass, and Abe Lincoln are reduced to entertainers. Oh, I hope not. But you might be right about that. You absolutely might be right about that. But I would hope not. Yeah. Very interesting. A load of, I don't know. It's hard for me. It's hard for me to say one way or another about moral absolutism, moral relativism. It's tough. I mean, again, talking about it in the context that Willow is talking about, I think it's fascinating. I think we human beings inherently think that there is a good and bad. Look, I believe that taking another person's life, if they're not trying to harm you, murder is taking away a sentient being's life is about the worst thing that you can do. I think the same is true. Ultimately, we've learned that a lot of animals are much more intelligent than we believe. And I think the idea that we take the lives of animals is, especially that we do big game hunting. I mean, I don't know how smart hippopotamuses are, but I know that elephants are very smart, and they deserve to be able to live long lives. Dolphins are smart. Whales are smart. Who are we to make decisions and say, oh, we can take their lives, we can exterminate animals that have just as much a right to be on this planet as we do, especially those kind of animals? The Earth, I don't know. I mean, I think that those are wrong things to do. I don't know how I'm getting off into this tangent about moral subjectivism, objectivism, and subjectivism. I don't know. But on that note, I'm going to bring this episode of Robservations to a close. I know everyone's like, Rob, you're doing shorter episodes. Well, I haven't had a topic. It's hard because I don't have topics that I can espouse my philosophy, my personal philosophy, and go on and on and on for half an hour. So that's what I usually do. But I want to thank everybody. Great crop of letters today, as they said in Never Let Me Go, a bumper crop of letters. So thank you for that. I very much appreciate you all writing in. I very much appreciate everybody supporting the channel via tips and super chats. So thank you all for that. If you want to send me a letter, you can at theburnettwork.net. By the way, it's been brought up to me by a few people that there have been comments that have been disappearing from our YouTube page, that people have made comments and the comments have been disappearing. I want everyone to know that neither Mike Bodden nor myself, we don't erase comments. And if comments, if something is incredibly disrespectful, maybe I'll go, if it's disrespectful to other people in the community, I might take it away. I don't mind if you want to be insulting to me. Anybody that calls me a monumental douche, I leave it there and let other people see it. But it's not our policy to get rid of comments on our videos. So I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if YouTube is getting rid of things or not. There are definitely interesting shenanigans that have been happening with this channel. I don't know if they're analytics driven or what. So if I could ask you again, if you like these videos, I guess hit like and hit subscribe, because it's our subscribers. It's very weird. If people notice, there have been people also that have said to the channel, Rob, you had no channel growth really since May. And it's true. We got to 39,000 subscribers, and then YouTube would take away every week 150 subscribers, 200 subscribers. You'd gain them back, and then they'd take them away again. It's very weird. I mean, unless they're all bots, it's bizarre. So I don't know. I don't know if they're just targeting me. I don't know if I've been shadow banned for whatever reason, but hitting like and hitting subscribe is always helpful. So if you haven't done that, I'd very much appreciate it. And hit the notification bell if you want to know more. Do you want to know more? That's always helpful for the channel. And obviously, I want to thank everybody for becoming members. This weekend, on Saturday, we have another member Zoom call. I love seeing all of you. It's gone from anywhere from 2 hours to 5 hours. So if you're a member of the channel at a specific level, you can come onto these Zoom channels. You can ask me, or Zoom chats, ask me anything that you want. And They're fun. I love seeing you. I love interacting. And, of course, we have Midnight Metal. Midnight Metal tonight. That's on the weekends. We have Midnighter tonight, the Robservations Midnighter at, lo and behold, midnight. And that's the show where I bring viewers on. So, Louis, if you want to come talk about In the Heights, maybe tonight. Tonight's the night. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's not. That was a terrible rendition of that song, so I apologize. I subjected your ears to that. So there we go. I want to thank my great moderating staff, the Blue Wrench Brigade. I want to thank Joshua Levesque, Brian Hepburn, Justin Toner. Who else is here? I guess I bet Louise Sparrow's here. I know she was here. But all of you, I want to thank you all for being the moderators that you are. It's great to have you. And I want to remind everybody that, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to all of you, have a better day. And I mean that. I surely do.